Right, let's get to action now on this story. Joined in studio by energy expert Mthunzi Luthuli and strategic lead at the Green Connection, Liziwe McDaid, also joining us. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. Shibe, I'll begin with you here in the studio. Why now? Why, if it was not affordable 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it's affordable now? One says this brings the question as to whether the rejection of nuclear at the time was more political than it was about the economies.
Yeah. Good morning, Thabo, and good morning to the viewers. The fact is, it's always been affordable. Okay. The rejection, as you correctly point out, was political. At the time, the people and the organizations that were opposed to nuclear basically lied, and they spread propaganda saying that the nuclear program was going to cost 1 trillion rand. Okay, and that was to procure 9,600 megawatts of power. I did, and many of us did the calculations at the time. It was not going to cost us more than 540 billion rands, even with cost escalations. Yeah. Okay, so it has always been affordable. And right now they're talking about the cost of implementing the renewables program, and figures of about 1.5 trillion rand have been bandied about, and nobody says it's too expensive for South Africa. So this is all about politics and not about the real issues and the real costs, and taking into account the interests of South Africa.
Let's bring Liz in. Liz, why is it affordable now than it was 5 years ago?
I don't think it's affordable at all. But the proof of the pudding is looking at the actual numbers. And I certainly haven't seen any numbers that show that it is affordable, any credible numbers. What I have seen is modeling from various sources of different universities and organizations that have used the same modeling that the department does, yeah. And nuclear doesn't feature. So, and the reason it doesn't feature because the models run least cost modeling, and what we are looking for is affordable, safe, secure, yeah. Energy.
So they're saying it's the cheapest form of energy that we have now in terms of the numbers. I think it's 40 cents per megawatt or something to
60, that. I think.
60 cents.
I think was what the minister said.
When IPPs are sitting at what, 2.20 cents. They are looking at Koeberg and saying there has not been a single safety issue that has come out of Koeberg. It's been functioning probably well. It's safe. In fact, there are more instances of batteries exploding and wind, solar catching fire that have been reported, and people falling and so on and so forth than you are getting out of nuclear.
You want me to respond to that?
Yeah.
So firstly, what the comparison in costs, what people do is they look at the cost of Koeberg right now once all the capital costs have been paid off, and they say that's the equivalent to a new power station, whether it's Medupi or a wind farm or a solar farm, and they compare the two, which is clearly incomparable because you have to look at the capex. So when you look at new nuclear and you take into account the fact that you have to pay off the capex, then it's not 60 cents. It's more expensive than, I think, solar, even the CSP, if I recall. But the other issue relates to safety, and now the International Atomic Agency actually did a report, and that agency obviously is not the regulator. It is an industry body, so it's like self-regulation. But they did a report, and they came up with a number of features that made Koeberg unsafe or was risk. One of those has been the concrete cracks, and we have also seen that Koeberg itself has had to shut down for various safety breaches over the years. So to say there's never been a single incident, I'm not sure how one can say that. And obviously to try and compare explosions often it's about wind turbines falling down, but various small minor accidents, even let's take a big one. Let's even take a gas explosion. To a nuclear accident is just, there's no comparison. Gas explosion is localized. Yes, it can be damaging. Yes, people could get killed, but only, it's localized, doesn't lead to long-term damage. Whereas the huge nuclear accidents we have had, there's the mop-up conditions are still carrying on. So I think that is not really putting the facts on the table if one's going to use those type of comparisons. And we also, of course, have to look at the fact that you produce nuclear waste, which has to be stored basically forever.
Yeah. 2,500 years, I believe so.
Yeah. Well, think about how this came about. This is an apartheid project, right? This nuclear. And so in the Northern Cape, there's a number of indigenous communities who suddenly found that they are living next to a nuclear waste site because the apartheid government just looked and saw where were the white people and put it somewhere else. And this government is now saying that waste site there, which is for low-level waste, the plans are now to turn it into a high-level waste site, which is where the spent fuel would go. Are they going to be asked? Or is this just like a plan that comes in from a centralized government without any acknowledgement of discussing with the people of the area?
All right, let's bring in Mr. Luthuli here. That's the argument that the minister is largely going to face and probably has been facing up until this point, and he believes they've ironed out the processes. Now, for every number that you present, there will be another number that is presented to us to the contrary. I think there should be somebody who really clears this out for us as to what exactly is it going to cost.
Okay. Thabo, I think that we really have to be honest in South Africa about what's going on here. You see, people like Liz, oppose nuclear, they oppose coal, they oppose any progress that we try and make in this country. And this inhibits industrialization, it inhibits job creation, etc. Right now we have no electricity, and we've got people like Liz who oppose every attempt to try and make sure that we have sufficient electricity for the country. So it's just not on. Okay, when you ask her to put the numbers, the figures, she didn't mention a single number. Okay, now let me tell you what it costs to build a nuclear power plant today. Yeah. Okay. The capital costs, and we're not talking about stuff that was built in 1980 or Quebec. I'm talking about plants that are being built now, that are being commissioned around the world. Yeah. Okay.
The size of 2,500 megawatts. How much is that going to cost?
So it's I'll tell you per megawatt. Okay. They range from $2.1 million per megawatt. To about $9 million per megawatt. And it's a broad range depending on a number of factors. Safety is a big issue, and I'll come back to the safety issue. And so if you look at countries like China and India, they are building at around, right now, I'm not talking, historical figures, they're building at around 2.5 million per megawatt.
Yeah, it would have been cheaper 10 years ago, maybe, than it is now with where the rand is sitting.
Yes. The cost is also dependent on your procurement strategy. Okay, so if you go the EPC route, which I was happy that the minister mentioned, you are likely to lower your costs because you get the vendor company and vendor country to provide the finance, and if you've selected them properly, they will have a stronger currency, and their cost of borrowing will be low, and you'll end up with a much lower cost of construction. Okay.
The other issue takes 9 years to even begin to get that investment.
That's what exactly. So the other factor are the interest rates. Okay. So those are the costs. But if you look at and there are many ways of comparing these costs. Okay. Most people look at what they call the levelized cost of energy, LCOE. Okay. If you look at the LCOE, nuclear is actually competitive because whilst the capital cost of building nuclear plants is high, the operations and maintenance costs are very low. So over the 60-year period or 80-year period of the nuclear power plant, your levelized cost is low.
When does it level? At what year?
Sorry?
When does it begin to level? At what year?
Around year 30, 40. Yeah. So that is the fact. Now, I can tell Liz that nuclear is quite competitive. It's better than renewables in many respects. It gives us proper energy, base load, 24/7, reliable.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's get back to the issue of safety. On the safety side, she mentions the fact of the matter is that we haven't had any disabling injuries. Nobody has died at Koeberg. And in the history of...
So there have been risk of cracks, though. That could certainly end up being fatal.
No, but when you build something, and then there's a time when you need to refurbish, you do that. Okay? It's not as if... if your house has a crack, you fix it and it's not a problem. Okay? So the point I'm trying to make is that we haven't had any incident in Koeberg where people died or people had disabling injuries. You know that in South Africa, more people die during the festive season. Just now, between now and the end of January, more people will die from car accidents than people that have ever died in the history of nuclear power generation. In fact, in the history of nuclear power generation, people only died at Chernobyl. Okay. And the number is around 70. I think 31 people died sort of on the spot, and some people died later due to nuclear radiation. And the number is around 70. Okay? 70. Now, we kill thousands of people in one festive season. So, and then people tell us that nuclear is not safe.
Yeah. Let's bring you in here then. Let's talk about those numbers. 2.1 million per megawatt is what it will cost us at this particular point. Sure, you've done your math. I saw you writing there quickly.
Let me share some numbers, Thabo. Let me share some numbers. So I'm sitting here with a various tables, and I'm just going to refer to, say, two numbers. The CapEx. So the CapEx is your capital cost. Now, he said, yes, it's your guest did indicate that it could be a little bit expensive, but let's just see. I have wind here, and this is in dollars per watt, which is a funny number, but anyway, at least it's comparable. 1.2 for wind, 0.8 for solar PV, and 8.3 for nuclear. That seems rather a big difference. Then let's look at the levelized cost, the rand per kilowatt hour. For wind, it's 0.87. For solar, it's 0.78. And for nuclear, it's 3.63. And just to add...
3.63 what is that? Is that operational cost?
To produce? That's the levelized. That's okay. Combining the CapEx and the OpEx. If you look at the OpEx, I can give you the numbers, 3.36 for wind, 1.2 for solar, and then 465.5 for nuclear. I guess that's because of the fuel costs. So when you start looking at the numbers, it's not looking good. But I don't think that's the issue. Is that I can throw numbers. Mthunzi can throw numbers, but that's not going to convince. Well, if I was watching, it wouldn't convince me. What I want to know is whose numbers are right, and that is what we have a thing called the IRP for, the Integrated Resource Plan, where it should be a process, and has in the past, where the government, DMRE, comes out with a plan, and they've now told us they have a plan, and then we look at that plan and we see what costs and assumptions they made, and we put our inputs, we debate it and engage, and then we change those numbers according to what is the best practice, the real numbers from wherever source. And then it comes out, we let the model run, and it comes out with what is the best mix. Every type of electricity generator has its own pros and cons. Yeah. But that's what we need to understand it, to see which ones we should be using and which ones have maybe gone past their sell-by date. Yeah. And that's the process that we should be
So looking at those pros and cons, one of the things that they'll say, Liz, is to say, well, pros and cons, nuclear versus IPPs. If I'm not mistaken, I think solar, if they say 100 megawatts, it's only a quarter of that actually that will be made available.
Yes.
Wind is about a third.
Wind is a quarter.
Wind is a
quarter. Yeah, solar can be a bit more because it can run the whole day.
Either way, but you look you look at nuclear, you get a good 80%, 85% in some instances of that power. So pros and cons, how do you weigh the two?
So that's the levelized cost. That's where that comes in. And also what I want to say is we also need to look at the system, and this is where we're looking. So in the old days, you literally took a power plant and you said the power plant has to run 24 hours a day, or as close as it can be, because that gives us what was called then base load. But what we need is electricity running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That's what we need. And whether you put that with a whole lot of different power plants working together, or you have a single power plant, we don't mind. We just want the electricity. But if you have a single power plant, it's got more chance of something going wrong and then the whole plant goes down. So over time, the world has moved towards a decentralized way of doing electricity. And that's where things like wind, solar PV, solar CSP come into its own, because those things can be spread around. And now they're adding in batteries and all sorts of interesting innovations with mine shafts and all sorts of things, and hydro added in. So you put all this together, and the best way that I can think to explain it is that you have a factory that is producing, say, electricity. Doesn't mean that every worker in the factory works 24 hours a day. You work in shifts, so that when one power station worker isn't available, there's another one there to take its place. And that's what the whole modeling of an IRP is about. Is people have these computer programs, the engineers sit there and work it through, and then you and I can look at the results, we can give our comments, we can assess those numbers, and then the government should come up with a plan that takes us forward with the most affordable, best energy that keeps us going for the years ahead.
Fortunately, I'm out of time. Let's leave it there for tonight. I appreciate you both. Thank you very much for coming on. That is Liziwe McDaid and Mthunzi Luthuli there with us. All right, in focus with what's making news next. Stay with us.